Down to Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts, we here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. I'm your host, Greg Sylvander. Today's floor plan with me, Brady Hawk, just the two of us. We're going to I guess it's a 2-man weave, not a 3-man weave in basketball. So it's basically layup drills. We're going to touch on a few things today. Today's floor plan, PJ Tucker and the defense. We're going to dive into some of that. It's still early. We don't have much of a sample size to go off of, but we are going to address those reports. Before we do, though, I want to shout out Off the Floor. That's where everybody needs to subscribe. The most heat anywhere. It is filled with channels to talk more than just Miami Heat basketball, so you can really have it replace your other social media and just basically talk Heat if you want to, but there's other channels there. You can get into different sports. We talk WNBA, we talk NFL, fantasy sports, music, culture, all of it. $2.99, $3.99 on your Apple device, Off the Floor. That link will be right here in the description. Check that out. That is our Discord server, Off the Floor. Also, if you have a leak detection and you don't know where it's coming from, you know where to go. Water Cleanup of Florida. That's where you're going to go for your water or mold damage issues. 954-579-0356. That's the phone number. Over 60 years of combined experience. Michael, his entire team can help you with leak detection issues, the damage assessment, preventative plans. They are fully licensed, insured, certified. They provide the one-stop shopping that every busy homeowner or business owner requires. No need to bring in any other contractors. They got you from start to finish. Service areas include Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach County. Call Michael anytime on his personal cell, 954-579-0356, or visit the website, wcufl.com. Over 70, it's probably more than that now, 5-star reviews on Google. Read those reviews. Check them out. They do great, honest work. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you have the schmutz, they got the guts. All right, Brady. So today, let's see. Actually, it was yesterday, but late yesterday on East Coast time. Some trusted reporters from The Athletic tweeted some information. I'm going to go ahead and cue that tweet up. This is Kelly Iko, is I think how you pronounce his last name, and Law Murray, both of The Athletic. So that's a credible organization. And these are credible reporters. The tweet came as a number of contenders, including the 76ers, Heat, Bucks, and Suns, have held trade conversations with PJ Tucker's representation. Sources told Kelly Iko and Law Murray. The 14-year veteran remains away from the team. The Clippers are keeping him away, hoping for a solution. So the first thing I want to dive into is I checked in on this. PJ Tucker is not likely to head to Miami via trade. He is due $11.5 million. The way that they could make that work is essentially combine PJ Tucker's salary with another player for someone like Duncan Robinson. If you want to think about mechanically how you make this happen from a salary perspective, I think we all will acknowledge that a trade like that makes absolutely no damn sense from a basketball perspective. The more that I looked into this, there's not really other ways other than maybe PJ Tucker agreeing to a buyout and eventually landing in Miami. But even that, they're skirting so close to the apron that their ability to add another player at the veterans minimum is really difficult. So straight up from a salary perspective, I don't expect this to get done on Miami's side. I think other contenders will look. Brady, just let's put this, we'll put the PJ Tucker stuff to bed pretty quickly. But just from a basketball perspective, do you see a need for a PJ Tucker type player with the roster as it is? We're going to talk about the defense, and they may be a couple defenders, at least one defender short. But I don't know that it's the PJ Tucker defender that I'm looking for, but I'm interested in your perspective on the PJ Tucker idea And just, I guess, even with the salary stuff aside, because I know I've kind of squashed it from that perspective, but just from a basketball perspective, do you see it making a ton of sense? And would you think PJ Tucker could help this Heat group specifically with what he brings at this age?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the buyout option, like if you're just talking about adding a depth piece, like definitely not the worst thing in the world. I mean, good vibes guy. He fits, we've seen what they've been able to do with him in the past. He could plug things. But in terms of like helping this roster, like this roster is in a position where they're more in need of a consolidation trade than a depth piece. Like it feels like they have to go in the opposite direction. And I look at Haywood kind of being the backup wing/4 right now, and it's like he's not like fitting into the rotation. So he'd be on the outside looking in. And I don't feel like their third string guy behind Haywood is that much of a dip off with Keyshawn Johnson that's ready to play. So I think they know he is kind of the next guy up as well. That, to your point, I think there's many other things that they feel like they need to plug defensively, mostly with the point of attack, whether it's, backup big man right now, who with both of the other update right now is Khalil Ware is out with an illness, which he wasn't in the rotation, obviously, in the first game anyway. Kevin Love remains out due to personal reasons. So right now it's literally Bam and Thomas Bryant. Like that's their big man room right now. So they might have to go to a little, probably more small ball, which I think a lot of people don't want to hear. But in terms of PJ Tucker, I mean, I just don't think he would play much. Like he doesn't feel like somebody that's really moving the needle. Yes, if you're getting the level that he was at a few years ago, because I was one of the bigger PJ Tucker fans in his tenure with Miami. Like he was absolutely great. He was a menace defensively. It feels like they need a guy like a bulldog type of defender defensively. And he's a guy that could guard the guard position. I mean, I brought it up in the offseason a lot. It's like there's going to be a lot on Jimmy's plate defensively this year. Like he's going to be put in a position on this roster in this rotation that he's going to have to like guard high-level guards like throughout the season. Like the Magic was a weird test because they're just bigger in general. Like they don't have somebody you have to put on a guard, but that's coming. So I think there's definitely a need there, but I don't think the depth is the problem with the team. We've talked all offseason. They have actually good depth pieces. It's more about making the guys at the top of the roster work together. So it'd be fun if it's on a buyout option, which even then it seems like it's kind of, a long shot, but like actually making a trade for him in the contract stuff. Yeah, it definitely feels like a long shot.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I am aware that the Heat could wait a certain number of days till everyone on the roster is more eligible to be traded, and maybe piece together some smaller pieces that could arrive at the 11.5 number that PJ Tucker comes in. But it's just when you look at the math of that, it wouldn't be a trade where you're acquiring more talent. So it's just I don't see a way there other than a buyout. I agree with you that for the vibes, it would be dope, but ultimately there's probably other players out there that they could look at. And frankly, I mean, there's guys in their own developmental system that I would be looking at that I think could provide things that Miami needs. So let's talk about the defense for a minute, because that's kind of before the PJ Tucker news. And I'm glad you mentioned the Kevin Love and Khalil Ware stuff, because that means the game in Charlotte, which I hope to be there for shoot around in the morning, but also cover the game. It looks like we're going to get a heavy dose of Thomas Bryant again to some degree, unless Spo pivots and goes small. So before we get to the core of this episode, which really is going to be about the defense, do you expect any rotation changes? Because he stuck to 9. You were right about that. I know that other guys got in as the game got out of hand, but let's not even really focus on that. When the game was still a game, he stuck to that 9. He did not go 10. You were right about that. It was Thomas Bryant, Duncan, Jaime Jaquez, and who am I missing off the bench? It's somebody super obvious. Thomas Bryant, Jaime Jaquez, Duncan Robinson.
And Haywood Highsmith.
And Haywood Highsmith. Thank you. Sorry. Gosh. And that's who Alex talked to today as well at practice. So make sure you check that out. He got time with Haywood Highsmith and Jaime Jaquez. So do you think that they shake it up and go with an Alec Burks in this situation? Do they size down? What are your initial thoughts on the rotation just heading into Charlotte? Let's go super micro level, just next game. How do they get through this period where they don't have those bigs? Do you expect them to switch it up, just because the first game was such a dud? Or do they throw that out the window and kind of with a fresh approach, maybe try it again? I'm interested where you stand there.
So I'll say first off, the only swing ability here where I think they do go 10 is if, and this is even maybe a long shot as well, but Jay Rich is upgraded to questionable for this game, which is definitely a surprise. Like I think he's kind of gotten better quicker than a lot of people expected than he expected. Because I know at media day he was talking about like a month away or like beyond a month away. So maybe he comes back, but I don't think they would throw him into the fire that quickly. Anyway, I think they honestly do stick with 9. They're lucky Charlotte's a team that you can actually play a little smaller against. Like they do play a little bit of small ball. Like you can match up in that way. But the big change to me isn't the rotation. It's not the number of guys in the rotation. It's the substitution pattern, which I think is legitimately the most important thing that needs to be shifted. And I know it was one game. And even during that game, I kept saying, I'm like, Spo's going to play around with this for a while. Like, even if like, let's say in that Orlando game, they won and like it worked, I think they were going to play around with it a little bit because I think they have options here. But the idea, and I know I talked about this in the last podcast for offensive reasons, but playing, the Terry with the second unit thing, I think it's even a little problematic defensively, like putting the pressure on Thomas Bryant with that unit. I think Bam is probably better suited for that group. I just think it makes a little bit more sense. And then when Tyler and Jimmy unit comes in, you could probably go a little bit more zone with those guys. And if they really want to go zone, I probably think if they were to change things up, Drew Smith probably does get some burn because I talked about this at the game the other day. I was like, if they do go zone, who's at the top of their press and zone? I'm like, Haywood and who? And like everybody kept coming back to it's like it's Drew. I mean, that's Drew. The other top of the. So like if they want to go in that direction, lean in like the style that they've been playing over the last year, he's the only change I could see happening. But ideally, I think they just need to change up the substitution pattern tomorrow. Like they need to find something different. They need to see if it burns into a rhythm. They can't just put Terry on an island, even though he probably might cook against his former team. But I don't think they want to build those habits. I think they want to build of what we were seeing in the preseason, where it's like more spread around offense, where things are moving, the ball's moving. And when you put Terry out in that lineup, I just think it's creating a formula where the ball's going to stick. Like that just feels like it's what's generally going to happen. So that would be my big thing. The thing is that we talked about last time as well is like, I expect them to go into Charlotte and play a really good game. Like we're going to walk away from this game probably. And we're going to say they look pretty good. Like they bounce back really well and all this stuff. But I think we're ultimately in the back of our heads going to think about that Magic game because I think it's not an offense or defense thing. I think it's a matchup thing. I think that they just don't match up good with those type of teams, with those just bigger positionally teams. And I know we went through something like Dallas. Like I think about Jimmy playing Dallas over the last few years. He always struggles against them. Like they give him problems because they
defend it with the
length. Do. Yeah. Like they layer up on him. They put bigger bodies on him. And I just think they more so have to prepare schematically for that stuff than like just in terms of just like changing up the whole offense or changing the rotation, etc. So I expect them to do similar things to what they did in that first game. I just expect the offense to look a little more smooth against that team because they can mismatch hunt and do all that stuff. But defensively is the key because I know this episode was about defense, but they have to force turnovers and they couldn't do that against Orlando. That's the only way they're going to be successful defensively in a lot of these lineups. Like if we're talking about them being a defender short, and a lot of the lineups and rotation, they're going to have to force turnovers. And it's crazy to say, I said this on the last episode, it's like the fact that they're leaning on they have to run in transition is crazy to talk about. Like we talked about how horrible they were last year. And it feels like the one thing that has changed year over year is that they are a little bit stronger in transition, but then now they have to find opportunities to get out in transition with a lot of guys in the roster. So that's what I'll be looking for. They're probably going to be a little bit more handsy, I guess, than they were in the first game, but I expect things to be pretty similar.
I think it's concerning. You mentioned it, like Orlando, you're supposed to be in the same tier as that team and you don't match up well with them. And they're also in your division. So you're going to have to play them 4 times, but also there's playoff implications. That's something to watch just going forward. If those types of teams continue to give Miami trouble, it's early, it's one game. I understand all that, but that is the kind of stuff that we wanted to see from this team. Certain groups give them trouble, like you mentioned. And so that is something to monitor. There's also some things to monitor with Charlotte about this next game so they can kind of maybe stack a victory as they look ahead to another easy matchup. And then New York comes to town. Before we talk about the Charlotte matchup, and then I want to hone in on the roster and just the defensive group as a whole, kind of at a macro level, I want to tell you about PrizePicks. You got to use that code 5. That's what gets you $50 instantly when you play your first $5. It's daily fantasy simplified. You can play NFL props, NBA props, You choose more or less on your favorite players, favorite statistics. Use the code 5 that gets you $50 instantly when you play your first $5. PrizePicks.com or download the app. It's the official daily fantasy sponsor of 5 Reasons Sports and 5 on the Floor. Check out PrizePicks. Use the promo code 5. Again, that gets you $50 instantly when you play your first $5. PrizePicks, daily fantasy simplified. So Brandon Miller is not going to probably play in this game. So that's important because he's probably, other than LaMelo, who's gotten off to a fast start offensively, probably their top option on the offensive end. So it looks like they'll probably play a group that consists of Seth Curry as well as Trey Mann will get additional minutes. So you're right in that this is not the same matchup that Orlando was. And I'll be interested to see how they match up, if they can go smaller and what that means for the Thomas Bryant minutes and if they pivot in a different direction. I'm just interested. There's also been, they're in a situation where their center, Mark Williams, has not gotten out on the court yet. So he's kind of TBD on if he plays. So the Hornets Charlotte may go smaller. And then so that could blow up the rotation a little bit. So I think that's something to watch. But the question I want to end the show with, as we just talk bigger picture, Caleb Martin out the door to Philadelphia. Haywood Highsmith returns, so he's replacing himself. If you look around the rest of the roster, we talked a lot in the summer. Brady, you've been a proponent of talking about Jimmy needing to pick up slack on the defensive end, having to guard. You mentioned guards earlier in this show, but there's even other archetypes that he has to be a primary defender against. Bam will have as much responsibility as ever, even as his offensive responsibilities hopefully grow. Would you consider this group heading into the season, the fact that Caleb Martin is out the door, and I guess, what do we say? Alec Burks is his 1-for-1 replacement to some degree. I'm trying to make a correlation there. Did they not go far enough to replace the defense that they lost with DeLon Wright and with Caleb Martin at the point of attack? Or what are your thoughts on how they handle that throughout the season, as that appeared to be at least something that we need to watch for from a defensive perspective early in the season?
Yeah, so I think they were pretty clear that they built defensive depth because you have Pella that you drafted, and I feel like he could probably get some minutes. So he's kind of a Caleb replacer in a lot of ways, but he's just not getting minutes yet. Keyshot could step in. I think if Haywood's ever out of game, he's playing in the rotation. And then you just get the idea of them going out and grabbing Nasir Little. Obviously, it didn't work out, but them trying to make that work, I think showed that they kind of wanted that depth, that kind of wing piece in general. But I said with PJ Tucker, I don't feel like the problem defensively is their depth. I know they could plug holes with some of their other defenders, but the issue is that they have to play their best 8 guys, and there's just no plugging in these extra defenders next to the other defenders. They have to just plug holes, it feels like. So like I said, Jimmy has to kind of step up in that way. And I think tomorrow's an interesting test because this is an example of a team where you have LaMelo, who's obviously their number one option. He's a bigger point guard. Do they go with Jimmy on LaMelo and then kind of spread out the defense in general? That's kind of would be my expectation. I think they probably do that, especially after the way the first game went. I probably would expect Jimmy to probably get him out the gate and guard him. If Brandon Miller was playing, they probably wouldn't. But now they have the ability to do so. I'm curious because that's ultimately what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to be creative defensively with matchups if they're not going to change up rotations. And there's such a heavy focus on the offense right now. That was kind of my main thing all offseason, was that I don't think the offense is going to ultimately be the problem. The issue was that both were the problem in game 1. But I don't think the offense is going to be the long-term problem that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. Like I said, I think in Charlotte, they'll probably have a decent offensive show. Against some of these other teams coming up, I think they'll be able to score. But I think the question will be, will they be able to hold up on the other end when they are in a flow offensively? In the back of our heads, I know Orlando was just a different matchup because they just kind of bullied them. There was no resistance. And after that game, all the Miami, Tyler specifically was I'm not worried about the offense at all. We just didn't bring effort. We didn't bring energy. We didn't bring resistance. And I think a lot of people hear that and are that's a problem. Game 1 that you don't bring effort and energy, that can't really happen. So maybe we could call it a wake-up call, and maybe they'll come back, defensively a little bit stronger the way they were in preseason. Because look, it was preseason, and I get it. Like, it's not real level regular season basketball, but the deflections and all that stuff was real. Like, you could see the energy defensively, a whole different energy level from that Orlando game to some of those preseason games. Like, it was pretty clear with that starting lineup. So they just have to bring it on that end to just show like what Spo can clean up the other stuff. He can clean up the matchup stuff, and he could probably plug some things there. But if you don't have like Jimmy jumping passing lanes, or you don't have at least Terry and Tyler, if they're going to be serviceable on defense, they have to, get deflections and do all that stuff they're doing in a few of those games. If you're not getting that, you're going to be it's going to be a terrible defensive game for you. It just is. They don't have the defenders on this roster to like overpower you with one-on-one stuff. And let's be honest, like, I think Bam has to have a better defensive game than he did in that first game. I think even one-on-one, there was a lot of one-on-one stuff in that Orlando game, and I think he would probably admit too, he has to be a little bit stronger on that end. So I think the defensively was a little bit of a wake-up call. They'll have to figure out the matchup stuff and all of that. That'll be what I'm looking for. But that also keys into the substitution pattern to me. And I know I hinted at that at the beginning, but like the only way to get in a rhythm defensively is to put the right lineups out there. And I just felt like the lineups were a little bit weird in that first game. And it's kind of, we should have expected it, because the fact that they never got to a rotation in the preseason, like just running the first unit, second unit, third unit thing, was like, okay,
now.
They were leaning offense the preseason. They're like, we just want to just figure out the offense with these units. But I think on the flip side, it's like, okay, well, you didn't get in a rhythm with your rotation to figure out what's going to work on the other end of the floor. And I think that's kind of what these 2 days off were for. So we'll see what that changes, tomorrow in Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm interested, particularly with 2 days off, and they did get 1 day off of practice, and then they were back in the gym. But that's a long time to go from, you took such a L on your home floor, home opener with the Pat Riley court stuff. I know that they probably wish they had a game the next day so they could get right back out and try to cleanse themselves of that first game. So I'm hoping that they bring the energy in Charlotte. This is a game, we talked about this. Orlando is a game, if you lose, that maybe some people say, you know what, they're in the same tier as you. You are bound to lose those games. But at Charlotte, the game against Detroit on Monday, Dwayne Wade's statue day, they need to get these games because they can't afford to lose to these bottom-dwelling teams. Even if we project some of these groups, like I know Brian Fonseca has been a proponent of Charlotte being better than maybe we expect, Miami needs to take care of business. Hopefully they do. Brady, thank you for joining me. Shout out to Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com, PrizePicks. Use the code 5 for $50 instantly. When you play your first $5, I will have you covered in Charlotte for Heat Hornets. Brady and Alex will be on 5 on the Floor post game, so check for that. We appreciate you listening. Peace out.